Hi, I want to say that we're very happy to be here with People's Visioning to speak to the folks here today, and we want to thank MediaCom for letting us have this opportunity to reach you folks. And so People's Visioning is a new organization, and we were formed to solve a lot of problems that we see in society today. And it's a real grassroots organization, and we intend to brainstorm ideas and solutions to a lot of our problems and actually implement them. So it's a real opportunity for people everywhere to have a hand in making things better within their communities, creating greater sustainability, bringing better jobs, helping build better local and rural communities. And today we're going to be talking about a part of that vision that has to do with food, our food and water security and our food and water quality, and how something on our August 5th ballot is going to tremendously impact the sustainable, more environmentally friendly food model. And we do have to have models that are sustainable, or we long-term are just not going to have the food that we need. So I'm very happy to have a guest with us today to really help us learn about this Amendment 1. What does it mean to our food system? What does it mean to the small farmers? And today, former Lieutenant Governor Joe Maxwell is here to share with us and talk about this issue. And Joe is a farmer himself. He's also been in the state legislature. He's an attorney, so he's very well qualified to speak to us about Amendment 1, which is the Missouri Farming Rights Amendment to our Constitution, which is a really big deal, amending the Constitution. And so I want to talk to Joe and let him visit with us today about why this is such a big deal, why it's important to farmers, and kind of let him lay out for us what he sees as the problems with Amendment 1 and why he's leading a campaign across the state to help educate us and to let us realize we, as food purchasers and small farmers around, as they know more about what this is, would want to vote no on August 5th. So, Joe?
Linda, how are you today?
I'm good.
Good.
Thanks for being with us.
I want to thank you and MediaCom for the opportunity to be here today and to talk to the voters. August the 5th is coming up very quickly.
Yes.
It is a primary, and most individuals, unfortunately, don't vote in the primary. They think, oh, that's that party thing, you know, the Democrats and Republicans, you know, fight each other off, and then we go to the November election. But what's important to know is that there are constitutional provisions that are provided on the ballot. And so unless they go to the polls to vote, they're going to miss the opportunity on the law that governs the people. It's our law. It's the people's law, right? That's the Constitution. So probably the most important thing that we have impacting our society is our Constitution. And there are issues on the ballot. One of them we come here today to talk about is Constitutional Amendment number 1. And we're strongly opposing that amendment and ask the people to take a serious look at it.
Yes, it's been called the right to farm, and I know the campaign here is helping us realize it's really the right to harm.
Right.
And I know the folks would like to understand this a little better because they're hearing in the media, or if they are hearing about it, what they're hearing is that's such a great thing, you know, and why wouldn't we want to, you know, forever guarantee the rights of our family farmers? So I want to have you help us understand that.
Well, first of all, it doesn't say help our family farmers.
It doesn't.
If it said that, I might be sitting here having a different opinion.
That's what different people say, though, the media or other letters.
That's the first thing our listeners and voters ought to say.
That.
Yeah, the supporters are twisting this as if it is something for family farmers, and it's not. I'm a fourth-generation family farmer in Missouri. My brother and I farm up around Mexico, Missouri. Wes Schumeyer, who's a good colleague of mine, and we came together and we worked with the organization Missouri's Food for America. And we are about family farmers. And when we looked at this initiative, all we see written all over it is corporate America, some of the very largest foreign corporations, multinational corporations, trying to find their way into our state constitution within the first section of our Constitution, which is the Bill of Rights portion, to carve out a right for corporations. And so we're asking individuals on August the 5th to vote no. It's not about family farmers.
Right. And, you know, really the farmers, being in the Constitution, it would trump our statutes that we already have, and the farmers that have always had the right to farm, the real farmers, have these laws that they sort of work with, and they've been working pretty well for the most part for our state and for redress sometimes from farmer to farmer. But, you know, sometimes the corporations have to take some extra steps, maybe go to the DNR or things like this, and they're essentially putting themselves in a place where they can erase all of that.
Right. You know, the first thing I think is important, and back in 1975, about the time I began farming, the Missouri legislature, in an effort to help protect Missouri family farmers' right to farm, against then it was investors from Japan and Spain coming in, manipulating the monetary market and taking their money and competing for land and farms in our state. In 1975, the legislature said enough's enough and adopted the Family Farm Act of 1975. And it defines who a family farmer is and a family farm corporation. So it's not that every corporation are these big giants that really don't care about the animals, the planet, or their neighbors. There's a lot of great family farm corporations out there.
Right.
But they have currently, they are written into Missouri statute and have protections against foreign corporations' unfair competition. And we have the rights to farm. You can't come and subdivide 40 acres next to my farm and then zone me out or sue me out of business. Right. I have the right to continue to farm. And that's important because, you know, I'm excited because I get to meet consumers all the time. You know, they're my customers.
Right.
And I want to have the kind of farm that's transparent about what I'm doing on my farm, how I'm raising the food that they will consume, and so that we have those kinds of relationships. Unfortunately, there are those that now are big players in the food system, our food,
right,
the thing you will eat, that don't want you to know. And so they're coming into the state trying to change the Constitution to get the same types of protections that family farmers and family farm corporations currently have in Missouri law.
Yeah, so they're trying to get those protections for big multinational types of corporations, right, that are a very different beast, so to speak.
Right. Yeah, and you know, I in Missouri currently, we allow our local governments to be able to kind of balance the safeguards for neighbors.
Right.
In North Missouri several years ago, a very large hog confinement, a big, large hog barn was going to be built within 675 feet of the water line of Mark Twain Lake. Was going to be over 10 million gallons of hog manure, poop.
Yes.
And 15 counties get their drinking water out of Mark Twain Lake, my home.
Yes.
Okay. So we went to the county government and said we need to have a balance here. Surely there ought to be some safeguards for the neighbors so they have clean drinking water.
Correct.
And we put a green zone around it. This amendment would deny neighbors from being able to go to their local governments and asking for redress for harm that could come to their drinking water or to the streams or the other parts of our environment, the air quality. So voters need to understand that those of us in the rural areas, we do sometimes need to balance our activities. Mm-hmm. And there are some actors that say, no, we don't want any safeguards. We don't want our neighbors telling us what we can do. We own it, we want to use it and abuse it. And so they're looking to pass this initiative, this Constitutional Amendment number 1 on August the 5th, so that they can abuse their neighbors, the land, and the animals.
So really it's kind of like one set of rights against another set of rights. It's one model of farming, sustainable, versus another model that isn't sustainable, and it's very destructive to the environment, part of its lack of sustainability.
Right, yeah, the model that they're advancing is not a sustainable model, but they really don't care.
Right.
Take a look at Iowa. The former editorial board member wrote in the Des Moines Register that Iowa had become the toilet bowl for the Midwest. Just a few weeks ago, the current editorial board came out with an editorial that said, why are we having our citizens in Des Moines having to pay $4 million to rehab their water treatment plant and $1 million more a year in operational costs to clean up the hog manure out of our drinking water because these big multinational corporations in Iowa have gotten away with lifting these restrictions.
Right.
And that's a good question. You're sitting here in Columbia, Missouri, you're sitting in Sedalia, Missouri, you're in Mexico, Missouri. You know, the citizens, I think, have a right to know that they're not going to have to bear the cost of these unrestricted types of abuses that these proponents are wanting to have. And that's why we ought to vote no on Constitutional Amendment number 1.
Definitely. It's going to be an expense to the taxpayer to cover up and essentially clean up, you know, after folks who don't care about handing something off to future generations in good shape, like our generations. This is a big difference because farmers have farmed for generations, and they, generally speaking, for the good actors, and there's always, you know, someone who spoils it for the good actors, but they have handed their farms off in at least as good, if not better, condition to the future generations, and that's a different concept for corporations who aren't really human people and human families who, you know, care about not only their land but how they farm and what they're handing off to their children.
Yeah, it's really a shame. Since 1886, our Supreme Court has gradually given more and more rights to corporations. Mm-hmm. Our founding fathers originally did not envision corporations to have human rights.
Correct.
Didn't really imagine them having free speech. However, and that's proven in letters of Thomas Jefferson. It's proven by statements of James Madison. Both of those individuals felt that corporations which were unrestricted would become greater threat to our country than the standing armies of our enemy.
Yes.
Because they would consolidate the wealth and the power and then abuse the people and abuse their community. Of course, Thomas Jefferson was a great agrarian, so he had a lot of the same values many of us family farmers do about we're the stewards of this.
Insight, yes.
Yeah, and that we need to care for it. So I unfortunately now, if we define a right in our Constitution based upon Supreme Court rulings, we will be granting that right that currently Missouri state law denies to foreign corporations. We'll be granting them that right in our own Constitution.
Right.
And that's why many of us family farmers are asking people to vote no. It's not about me. I'm happy to farm. I'm happy to feed Columbia and its citizens. I'm happy to join with my neighbors and have a good environment and a good neighborhood. And we're doing that today. We don't need Constitutional Amendment 1 to farm and to feed our neighbors.
Right. Right now we have a flourishing, it's kind of, you know, just I don't know if you'd call it a resurgence, or I guess it really would be. Our farmers markets are kind of coming back, and we have a lot of people that are looking to have that relationship with their farmer provider of their food. And I think that these corporations see that model again as a threat to their profits. If people move to this other system that sort of cuts out the middleman and, you know, lets people buy directly from the person who produces this food for America. And I think that that's a huge part of this is the farmers who are in that category would be really threatened by this wild growth of corporations just putting a CAFO, for instance, and that's a Confined Animal Feeding Operations, CAFO,
Right.
In pretty much anywhere they want, because now this amendment would trump all the different statutes, and it would erase local control in many parts of our state, and so that these things could go just about anywhere. And there are a lot of negative side effects to them besides the water that you've mentioned, but you know, some of that is it reduces the property value of the farmers next to them, and sometimes eventually then maybe the next generation doesn't want to inherit that, and they gradually expand and eventually they shove out these types of more sustainable models, including with not only the CAFOs, but the genetic modification of organisms and anyone who might try to be an organic farmer, and who, you know, we can't control the wind carrying the pollen and the drift from the chemicals used in those operations, the heavy pesticides and herbicides. So these farmers next door, and I've seen photos of people who farm that way here next to a farmer whose drift killed a whole row of grapevines they had, and things like this. It does happen, and I know that the genetic modification, you know, properties that pollinate an organic farmer's organic corn, for instance, and then the owners of this patent on the genetic modification say, okay, now your seed belongs to us, you know, you have our characteristics. So there's a lot of things that are really frightening with some of these models when you look at them in the long term. Yeah,
you're exactly right. The threat that farmers like myself have are actually not the government coming in and driving me off my farm, or animal welfare folks or environmentalists. They're actually my friends in this battle, the people that want to know how food is raised and processed, and want to make sure there's limited impact. The things that I have very few opportunities to fight back today in the law, but I have a few left, and this amendment will reduce that number to 0.
Yes.
And so it is an amendment that goes against the very core values of many of Missouri's family farmers, and is one that individuals should really take a hard look at. It's not about the family farmer. Most everybody I talk to loves a family farmer.
Yes.
And that's exactly why the other side, as we began this show talking about the word family farmer, that's why the other side steals that word, steals my name. It's almost identity theft.
Yes.
They take my identity and plaster it on their signs so that they can pass this initiative that really harms the very people they're claiming it helps.
Yes, and as you pointed out earlier, it doesn't say that in the language that, you know, is in there, because maybe then they might have something to argue, who knows, but the bottom line is they're trying to hide behind the family farmer and get this passed really for their own personal agenda.
Yeah, one of the other issues that's really a problem in this, when you go in to vote, and I hope everyone does, when you go in to vote, you're going to read that it gives the citizens the right. And that's not true. It's not about citizens. Matter of fact, if you actually read the document that the legislature passed and put on the ballot, it doesn't use the word citizen. It uses the words of farmers and ranchers so that corporations can also receive the same rights that current individual citizen farmers have in Missouri law.
Right, so they can claim to be a farmer or a rancher. Right. But they can't claim to be a citizen.
That's right.
So it's very tricky how they use the language.
If the word citizen was in the real amendment, the actual language of the amendment, it would be a different issue.
Yeah, it would be
But
more
when they went to the Secretary of State, they were able to convince them to put the word citizen in what the citizens voting will read. And it's very deceptive, so I don't want any of the viewers to be deceived. That word citizen isn't about them. It's not about citizens at all. They use different words in the actual language of the amendment.
So what we see on the ballot really isn't the actual language.
That's right.
We see sort of a description, a summary or whatever.
That's right.
And so when you read what is on there, it's going to sound really great.
That's right.
But it's really not great.
It's not great if you actually read the issue that is under it, that would appear in the Constitution. It does not use the word citizen, because if it did, then the proponents, these big corporations, would not be getting any rights.
Right, and
so
they would be objecting.
Right,
and we don't hear them objecting in this fight. So
that's right. We don't hear them
a good clue.
Yeah, exactly.
So I wanted to say that we have a lot of small farmers, yourself and Wes, and I know a lot of farmers here at the Columbia Farmers Market who individually are opposed to this. But I know there's a website www.votenoon1.com. You should go and learn more there, but you can sign up there to pledge that you will vote no and to maybe volunteer to help in some way. But also there's a list of, growing list of supporters of the opposition, which would be some of them family farms and also the Missouri Farmers Union. So there are a lot of farmers who are understanding that this is really not about them. Right. It's not about helping them.
Yeah, I'm not the only family farmer opposing.
Right.
And opposing in this case is good.
Opposing in this case is good.
It's not that the Farmers Union is opposing what we're wanting, they're agreeing with us. The National Farmers Union is the oldest family farm organization in the United States. And so when it steps in, and its Missouri chapter is the one that stepped in, of course it is Missouri, when it steps in, you know, that's a sound voice of what the family farmer's position is. So yeah, I think it'd be great. It's votenoon1.com, and the one is the numeral 1.
Yes.
The numeral 1.
Not spelled out.
Not spelled out.
One.
If you spell it out, you're going to go to Alaska site. They have a constitutional amendment, and they chose to spell it out.
Oh.
So viewers shouldn't get confused. It's with the numeral 1.
Yeah,
and go and look at all the people lining up now to say no on constitutional amendment number 1 on August the 5th.
Because it's really not about the rights of the folks that we think of, and it's really about corporate rights. So we do urge folks to get involved, and that's another matter. We don't have a lot of money. Right. And you can make donations there at the site. And because we don't have a lot of money, the real grassroots folks have been having, at least here in our area, recycling of signs donated by West Shumire and paid for by Friends of West Shumire. And so we have some, signs we've put together ourselves to try to help get the word out. So you know that this is really a real grassroots
Yeah, it's a great community event, the community coming together, using the resources they have to let their voice be heard for August the 5th.
And so this is really about the people, and I think most of you viewers are fall into that category with Joe and I, and we really need to understand that we have to step up because we don't have the deep pockets to have all those big signs that are going up out there that tell you to vote yes. There's a lot of them. We're hearing about those all the time as we try to make our tiny little signs here. But we want to urge you to help us because that's really the only way we're going to win this fight. We don't have the money to win it any other way, and so we're asking everyone to really think about what can I do to spread the word. We're saying make a list of 10 friends, call those friends and say, hey, I heard about this, have you heard about it? And really educate them and get their support to make it to the polls, because as Joe mentioned, August 5th is not a time that a lot of people go to the polls. Maybe Democrats and Republicans go because it's the primary, but as Joe said, independent voters and voters who might not necessarily go even to all the elections otherwise, they will lose their right or their voice or their say-so in something that really is going to matter to them, and that's our state constitution.
That's right. It's the people's law. It's their law. I hope they do remember to go to the polls on August the 5th.
Yeah, and that's really what we want to make sure you get here. Before we close, I do want to ask you, I'm going to mention a couple more things. The governor just came out and actually vetoed the bills that led up to this being put on the ballot to show that he doesn't support this being put into our Constitution. And you know, the big corporations in other states with battles or things that they don't like, we'll hear them attacking those things they don't like, and so we'll probably hear things like, well, Governor Nixon isn't supporting small farmers and these kinds of things. And so I want to hear you speak a little bit about that before we close today, both about Governor Nixon and maybe the Missouri Farmers Care folks who kind of ruined a debate here we could have had to get the truth out. So I want you to tell us about those couple of things.
Well, first of all, I commend Governor Nixon. His basis for saying he was leaning to oppose this amendment is because it is our Constitution. Clearly, the language is very vague and very broad, and the governor's position is it is our Constitution. We should be very, very careful about what we do with it. Yeah. So I'm finding more and more as I travel the state, and I've been zipping across it quite a little bit the last couple of weeks, coming in here, driving 3 hours to get here to drive 2 hours after I leave, because the citizens of the state are waking up that, one, there's an election on August the 5th, you know, because we kind of sleep along the 4th of July, we wake up. And so they're agreeing, don't mess up our Constitution. And the group advocating, the loudest voice and proponents for this is Missouri's Farmers Care. And they're an organization of corporations. And they did call a legislator in Southwest Missouri, in Joplin. I was to have a debate in Joplin that the press was part of, and the debate coach was going to be there to moderate.
So it had both sides.
It had both sides, and I was excited about it because I do believe that the side I'm on is the right side for Missouri. But of course, the legislator thought the same thing. Missouri Farmers Care, an organization, not a group of his citizens, not his constituency, not even a group of Missouri citizens, but an association of corporations, called him and asked him not to debate me, and he chose not to. I think that we will be able to have my statement. The community went forward with the debate, and there was just an empty chair for those side. There was a statement read by the state representative, and I think we're going to be able to get that up on YouTube and get information out for those that want to see what that statement was, and then how we responded as to why the citizens in this state should vote no on Constitutional Amendment number 1 on August 5th.
Right. And so, you know, it does seem kind of unusual that if the proponents feel good about their message, that they wouldn't want to take part in a debate and help educate the citizens to
You know, when the issues, as we've described them, I think the overwhelming majority of Missouri citizens are going to say, well, I don't want that in my Constitution. So, you know, transparency and open discourse is not in their interest.
Right.
Putting big checks into a bank account that you can't tell who put the money there, and buying ads and big signs is the only way they can win.
Right. And Missouri's Farmers Care is a PAC, a political action committee. Am I correct in understanding
I believe it's
that?
a continuing committee, which is pretty much the same thing. In other words, it is designed to be able to take contributions, not have to disclose those contributions. PAC would have to disclose them. So this allows...
This is even more less transparent.
It's a lot less transparent, and so then they can run the ads and they can do the work in their own name. So they're just an organization of corporations who are proponents trying to get rights put in place for corporations in Missouri's Constitution.
And if they see that they might have some growing support here that they might want to try to fight back, I know that in other states when this happens, the folks with the deep pockets tend to dump a lot of money with, you know, again, this deceptive kind of characteristic that certainly is in their languaging of their signs, and how they, you know, write the language for us to both vote on, and then what's actually really behind that, the language behind the language. Sometimes I
I'm really concerned. I think the viewers need to also know in the Citizens Day that this amendment was offered in 2 other states just this year to be put on the ballot, Oklahoma and Indiana. And it is a national movement by the largest corporations in the country. It is an ALEC, American Legislative Exchange Council initiative. And of course, most of us know the Koch brothers are part of the funders of ALEC. And so this is a national issue. And yes, they are willing to spend a lot of money. We were able to stop it. I was part of a group of family farmers that did stop it in Oklahoma. And the legislature saw the wisdom of our arguments and said, we're not putting this on the ballot. The same thing happened in Indiana. It's very unfortunate that the Missouri legislature did not pause long enough to really understand what they were doing before they put this on the ballot.
And I know that the proponents of that talk about, well, you know, outside interests. We have to protect ourselves from outside interests. And as you just described, the ALEC operation being in all these different states and these different corporations, you know, are people that would certainly qualify for outside interests themselves, as they use that derogatory, they think a derogatory kind of description of
right.
something or another, various kinds of ways that they try to hammer.
Well, I've lived here, my family's lived here for 4 generations. I'm about as non-outside as you can get. And the Missouri's Food for America, your organization, are all well rooted in the heart of Missouri.
Yeah, and the grassroots
and the grassroots people. So I do think it makes a difference, and I think our voice on this side of opposing Constitutional Amendment number 1, is the true voice of Missourians, regardless of what the other side's how they're trying to paint it.
So you just have,
whenever you, as you did, organize your neighbors to come in and hand stencil signs, that is the kind of grassroots movement that is the truth of the matter, and people need to recognize that and vote no.
Yeah, and if you see this soon, please contact People's Visioning locally, at least. We've sprouted here out of Columbia, Missouri, and we, in less than 2 years, have accomplished an awfully lot of things. We're trying to start a student branch, People's Visioning Mizzou. You can find us on Facebook. But we would love to get your help or your assistance with this campaign to vote no, which is our primary focus at the moment. We talk about lots of different issues, and we're here for the long haul to really take back all these problems, as I mentioned at the beginning here, to restore our governance to our people. And that's one thing. You mentioned Koch brothers and ALEC. Princeton University recently did some, I don't know how long their study was, but they took some time to do a study that was announced earlier this year about our democracy and the state of our democracy. Now, are we even a democracy any longer? And they found with their research and their study that America is really no longer a democracy. Princeton says that the best description that fits what we are is an oligarchy. And that is really when people like the Koch brothers, these influential corporations, have enough influence over our government and things that happen in our society at large that they essentially are in control, almost like a shadow government. And so this is why People's Visioning exists, to work with all these other organizations, and they with us, to be here for the long haul to straighten that up.
Yeah.
So we hope you'll check all of us, go to the website, votenoon1.com, the numeral 1, and check People's Visioning on Facebook out. We hope to start other chapters or groups in different parts of the state of Missouri and even across the nation, and actually even across the world. We had one of our Mizzou students that was part of our People's Visioning Mizzou, which we just started at this spring break, so it's very new, graduate this year and go back as a scholar to his home country of Kashmir, and he really liked what we were doing and wants to do that kind of thing in his country, started People's Visioning even elsewhere. So it's the idea that we the people have the power. And in some ways, we have become complacent. We've said, "Oh, my vote doesn't matter. Politics is boring." Whatever the reasons are, we have to overcome those reasons to say, if I don't get active pretty soon, this is going to be hitting me directly in my face, and I'm going to wish I had, but it'll be too late. So in People's Visioning, we have all these different areas. Food is one of our areas, but we have other areas too. So people, whatever their passion or interest is, they can find a place to plug in and help with this big picture. But right now we're saying, everybody vote no on Amendment 1, and we're saying there are lots of people, you're in good company. The League of Women Voters has come out against it. Missouri Rural Crisis Center thinks of it as a crisis. They're taking action. And as we said, the Farmers Union, the oldest organized farmers organization in the country, and so we would love to have you join us. And I want you to
the Sierra
say
Club has also stepped up.
Sierra Club has stepped up.
A lot of people recognize that name.
Yeah, and anyone else you want to mention, or any other things you feel we haven't covered.
But I think what's important is that for every viewer, as we said, you know, to remember this is their Constitution. It's the people's law. Mm-hmm. And that August primaries usually aren't what they get up and go out and vote on, mm-hmm. but this is one that they should.
Yes.
And it's their right. If they do not want large billionaires and corporations owning and controlling their country, they have the power in this country to show up at the polls and punch the no button.
Yes, that might feel kind of good.
It might feel real good. It's going to feel good to me.
Yes, and you know, I think that that's something that we would just urge people to do. Call your 10 people and let them know what's going on and ask them to do the same, because that's really how we're going to win this. It's the people power, and get your friends to the polls August 5th. And we want to thank you for spending your time with us today, and I think that there will be some contact information on the screen here, so other than what we've mentioned, and you know, we'd urge you to be in touch with us if you want to get active or maybe even start a People's Visioning in your community, because this is one fight that's hugely important right now. It has huge consequences, but there are going to be more fights. So thank you for joining us, and thank you, Joe, for all you're doing.
Thank you for all your all's work in People's Visioning.
Oh, we appreciate that. Thank you.